But we also have some new developments on a story that broke at the end of our show yesterday. Years after Rudy Giuliani accused Georgia election workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss of fraud during the 2020 election, he is conceding his statements were false. This came in a court filing. It's part of a defamation lawsuit Freeman and Moss filed against Giuliani in 2021. The case accuses Giuliani, who at the time, you'll remember, was representing former President Trump, of publicizing a heavily edited video he falsely alleged showed the two workers somehow changing votes.
Tape earlier in the day of Ruby Freeman and Shay Freeman Moss and one other gentleman quite obviously surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they're vials of heroin or cocaine. And they're still walking around Georgia lying. They should have been questioned already. Their places of work, their homes should have been searched.
In one of the videos we just watched, Mr. Giuliani accused you and your mother of passing some sort of USB drive to each other. What was your mom actually handing you on that video?
A ginger mint.
We had at least 18,000, that's on tape. We had them counted very painstakingly, 18,000 voters having to do with Ruby Freeman. She's a vote scammer, a professional vote scammer and hustler.
She was none of those things. Of course, in a two-page declaration, Giuliani now acknowledges he had in fact made the statements about Ms. Freeman and Ms. Moss that led to the filing of the suit, and that the remarks, quote, carry meaning that is defamatory per se. A political advisor for Giuliani says that means, quote, Giuliani did not acknowledge that the statements were false, but did not contest it in order to move on to the portion of the case that will permit a motion to dismiss. Giuliani says he still believes his comments are protected by the First Amendment and refused to accept they cause harm to the women. Here is what Freeman and Moss told the January 6th committee last year about the harm they say they did endure.
There is nowhere I feel safe. Nowhere. Do you know how it feels to have the President of the United States to target you? The President of the United States is supposed to represent every American, not to target one, but he targeted me, Lady Ruby, a small business owner, a mother, a proud American citizen who stand up to help Fulton County run an election in the middle of the pandemic.
A lot of threats, wishing death upon me, telling me that, I'll be in jail with my mother, and saying things like, be glad it's 2020 and not 1920.
Were a lot of these threats and vile comments racist in nature?
A lot of them were racist. A lot of them were just hateful.
Attorneys for Freeman and Moss released a statement about the development saying, quote, Giuliani's stipulation concedes what we always have known to be true. The allegations of election fraud he and former President Trump made against them have been false since day one. So, Danny, let's talk about the legal implications of this. What is all that legalese that we heard from Giuliani and his team? What does that translate to?
Well, it seems to me they're stipulating to the underlying facts, because in order to get to the motion for summary judgment phase, there have to be no issues of fact. In other words, all the facts are conceded, and the only thing for the court to decide is an issue of law. And Giuliani's defense appears to be not so much that, hey, what I said about them was true or wasn't true. It's more that it doesn't matter what I said about them, whether it's true or not. I had a First Amendment right to say it. Therefore, there is no defamation. And that's why it appears that he's making this concession in order to put issues of fact aside, decide them for the moment, and get to the motion for summary judgment. And really, it's a minor kind of Hail Mary to try and throw the case out early. That's what summary judgment really is. It's always a long shot. The odds are, if you're moving for summary judgment, either as the plaintiff or the defendant, you're probably going to lose, and the case will probably move forward to trial. But it is a mechanism by which you can get rid of a case that has no issues of fact and only issues of law. If the only issues are of law, then the judge can decide them, and everybody can move along.
So, Eugene, that's the legal aspect of this, but let's just speak about the the morality of this moment. Right. This was reprehensible. This was something that was false. It was untrue. And as I noted in my book, and others have chronicled so well, and we heard that emotional testimony from these two election workers who were just trying to do the right thing, trying to, frankly, do their civic duty. Yeah. And they felt like their lives were threatened. They were harassed for months. And it's in moments like this, repeated other places across the country, have had a chilling effect where I know a lot of local officials are worried they're not going to be able to find poll workers and volunteers for the next election.
People who have said and done it for years that they loved being a poll worker, that it felt like it gave them a lot of purpose around the elections, are terrified to do so because of these moments like this. And I will say, when we saw these two women live during this committee hearing, that was one of the most emotional. It was one of the most interesting aspects of the committee hearing up to that point, because a lot of it was talking to officials and talking to Republicans who were in these rooms, or seeing them as they were talking in their testimonies. This was about real people who were impacted by the lies that Giuliani and Donald Trump and others were telling. And I think that was one of the things that, as people were watching and you started seeing polling, that people were paying attention to those moments just as much as the fact-finding missions. And it's just a reminder of how central Rudy Giuliani and his lies during the 2020, the aftermath of the 2020 election, and even before, how central they are to a lot of the investigations swirling Donald Trump right now.